Hi, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda, and this is the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast.
This podcast is all about taking action and creating that badass business abundance and life that you want.
Where we share stories, laughs, wins, and epic fails to show you the whole picture of the entrepreneurial journey.
It's not just unicorns and rainbows, people.
Jump on and follow us through this raw and witty roller coaster,
where we get down and dirty and go behind the scenes of life and entrepreneurship.
Get on it,
get over it,
and get after it.
Hey, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. Welcome to the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast. We have another exciting guest today. Lynn, tell us all about her.
Yes, we're excited to have Coleen Greco, and she is coming from Boston. I haven't heard the Boston accent yet. Oh man, our executive director, Joanne, she had the Boston accent, didn't she?
Man, it was amazing.
Loved it. Anyway, Joy isn't just her calling. It's her middle name. Well, it's Joyce, but let's roll with it. Coleen is a compassionate, empathetic, and violently authentic human being, but she wasn't always this way. I love that. Violently authentic. You are our people. Like many, she's been plagued with her own self-defeating thoughts. Some of them she's carried for over 4 decades. Through her own journey of self-discovery, spiritual exploration, and personal crisis, she's managed to transform her life into the most unimaginable source of joy. Today, Coleen is a joyologist. She provides mindset and nutrition coaching, as well as personal training to people who feel stuck and want to reclaim their life. As a motivational speaker, she works with individuals and corporations around the globe, teaching folks how to reclaim their joy using the SNAP method, which she trademarked, which I'm excited for because we are trademarking the Pursuit of Badasserie. We're in process. It takes forever.
No,
anyway, welcome, Coleen. Yay, we're excited to have you.
So happy to be here. Yeah, and by the way, the trademark process takes a long time. So
ours just came through. I forgot to tell Lynn. Ours just came through, so we're good.
Oh, okay, high five.
Only took 2 years.
2 years. Dang, that's exciting. Anyway, Coleen, we're super stoked to have you on. Please tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Oh, yeah. No, and thank you for having me. I'm so excited for this discussion today. So about 6 years ago, we had a trauma in the house. My younger son was 10, almost 11, and had a suicide attempt. So as you might imagine, that can be a pretty jarring and traumatizing episode. And so as a result, I didn't handle it well in the beginning. I ate and drank anything I could get my hands on and probably put on about 40 pounds in 3 months or something like that. And it never really had a weight problem before. So I'll also say that. So it was very out of character for me. But through this, as we were trying to rebuild our life, we reevaluated every single friendship. I didn't let anything in our circle. I didn't let friends in. I didn't let, neighbors come over. Social media was like off limits. There was nothing, and really tried to figure out how I could be the best role model for my 2 kids and my husband, who were all just sort of looking to me to figure out, like, what do we do next? And I can remember laying right out there outside my door, in front of my front door on my rug, just not knowing what to do next, and just saying, what we need to do is, because when you're dealing with something like this, you think in seconds. You think, like, there is no, what am I going to have for lunch? It's like, how am I going to make it to the next hour? We started thinking about little things that we could do that would bring us joy. Like, instead of being angry about walking the dog and the fact that it takes an hour to get a mile, right? He sniffs, he stops, he does. How about looking at it as like a moment of sweetness, a moment of joy, that he's having a great time out there, and what is he looking at, and what bird is he trying to chase, and how can I make that fun instead of a burden? And we just did that across everything, every experience we had. We just found these little moments of joy, and joy has always been part of my core. I didn't always know it, but it was part of my core. My father used to say, I really named you right. My first name is Coleen, which in Gaelic means girl, and Joy or Joyce, my middle name, means happy. And so that's just always been who I am. And I've always been in these roles or situations where I was in service to other people. And I can think of no better people to be in service to than my family. And so that's kind of how this all started.
Finding joy is so important, and it's really underrated, I think, in your overall happiness. People think about these huge goals, and there's nothing wrong with having huge goals. However, those are often further away. And so if you can find joy and light in each day rather than this giant thing that's out there, it will make such a difference in how you handle life, how you feel about life, how you feel about obstacles that come your way, which are inevitable.
Yeah. And I think, when you start out in any kind of traumatic situation, anything like next week or next month is just insurmountable. And so that really helped me to figure out how I could better serve them. And I'm super happy to say he's now 17. I like to say when people say, how's he doing? I'm like, well, he annoys me like any other 17-year-old would. So I feel like we're doing pretty well. But he really is, he's thriving. And we were in a really bizarre situation. We're in Boston and we didn't have a therapist or a doctor that would talk to us. No one returned our phone calls. So we were really on our own to rebuild. And I'm so happy to share that we're all in a much better place. And it's a little cliche when you hear people say, your mess is your message, but it really is. It has brought us to a far better place as a family. I'm in a far better place. I have found my purpose and my calling as a result of it. So I look back on that time with gratitude, which I could have never imagined I would feel that way now.
Yeah, it's a bit personal for me, your story. I'm gonna get emotional. You have to cut this shit out. This is this is the first podcast we've gotten emotional on. I'm sorry. I don't know why I am. Whew. I do know why. Okay. Gather my shit. I definitely want to share with the audience like the steps that you took to really kind of put one foot in front of the other, like live second by second to rebuild, because regardless if it's a traumatic experience or not, like this is a fundamental, I know that you teach this and it's a fundamental tool. And I know from my own experience, my own way of navigating stuff like that, like to be able to like get to that next second and then get to that next minute and then get to that hour and then get to that day and then get to that week and then get to that month where you are making moves to create the momentum to either heal, produce, whatever that is, like process through what's going on. So I would love for you to share a little bit about that.
Yeah. And thank you for your vulnerability too. I'm sorry if I triggered you in any way, but it is highly emotional, but it's an amazing story when you unpack it. So again, in the beginning, we were working off of the next minute, making sure he was safe, making sure that we were functioning. We still had corporate jobs to attend to and whatnot, and another child to make sure he was okay. And as I started to reclaim my health, because I had ballooned up to weights I hadn't seen since pregnancies, I was working with a nutrition coach. And again, these moments come, and at the time, they're painful and they're offensive in some cases. But I look back now and think, that was the greatest gift. So one thing that happened was I was probably 35 pounds into my weight loss. I had lost 52 overall. So I was about 35 down. And I said to my coach, don't you want to know what caused my weight gain so that you can help me develop strategies so that I never have to do this again? Like, what woman wants to lose that weight twice, right? Guys have a little bit of an easier time, but women especially. And he said, I'm not your therapist. And I was like, now wait a second. Like, that was not supportive. There could have been a better delivery, but what it did was it unlocked an idea in my mind. And I said, I can do this so much better than he can. Like, I know how to lose the weight. I have walked that walk. I know all the struggles. I'm a working mom. I am like all the labels I could possibly think of. And I can develop these strategies to help women keep the weight off. It's the emotional piece that we tend to ignore. We separate that. We think, we're overweight, but it's not because of these limiting beliefs and these triggers that we have. It's 100% because of those. Like, that is exactly why you're overweight, right? So I really believe the SNAP method found me. I'm out on my front lawn, kind of journaling, and it came to me that there are really 4 steps to identifying these triggers and then deciding what you want to do with them and letting them go. The SNAP method is an acronym. It stands for stop, notice. The A, I can never decide if I want it to be accept or analyze, so I have it as both. And P is practice gratitude. So you begin to, as you kind of journal through this, and you really do have to journal through it, you can begin to see these triggers coming. The first thing that happens is you have some sort of visceral response. You get like sweaty palms or shakiness in your voice, or I get something in my throat, like a nice lump in my throat. Other people, they have their heart start to race. And you just like, you feel it. And that's the trigger. You have been triggered. Now, what are we going to do with it? So the first step is to stop. You literally allow the trigger to come. It's already here. Like, it's kind of like a storm, right? Just own it. Might as well deal with it. And you stop, you break the thought pattern by just allowing it to settle. You don't run off to the pantry or the liquor cabinet and self-soothe. And the next step is to notice. And so when you're noticing, that's when you grab your journal and you start to document all the things that are part of this trigger. So that visceral response that you get, but it's also the story as you believe it to be. This isn't the time to judge or criticize your own version. It's really important to capture it as you believe it to be, which is one version of the truth. The next step is accept and analyze. So now you can judge. Now you can go back, reread your entry, and decide which of your comments are based on fact and which ones are based on emotion. 2 very different things, right? Sort of like your opinion of something versus what actually happened. And the last step is to practice gratitude. And again, like, that sounds kind of crazy to think about. I'm so glad I was triggered today. This is awesome. It feels so good. Well, yeah, because it's your body's way of saying you have work to do. Like, you haven't gotten over that thing yet. And so it is a gift. You just don't really see it that way. But it also, in my opinion, keeps you humble. And it reminds you that you're human and that we all get caught off guard. We all get triggered by things. Sometimes triggers come in like the side door. You don't always see it coming. And it's again, your body's way of telling you that there's work to be done. So when you walk through those 4 steps, you're able to identify trends over time. You're able to see the trigger coming before it comes, but then you get to decide what to do with it. And in that instance, it's always my recommendation, let it go. You know the truth. You can see the fact from the fiction. And 9 times out of 10, the story you believe is not the truth.
So, I mean, a lot of our audience know by now, like, I've definitely lived through some major trauma, and I've done a lot of the work that you're talking about. I love the 2 A's. Actually, I thought of another one, acknowledge, because I think it's also like acknowledging that you've been through it, but it's different behavioral styles. It's also a process. And the practicing gratitude, I really like, because it helps you take, and this is a big thing about mine, is taking responsibility for my part. And that practicing gratitude allows you to be able to say, okay, like, I am thankful. And why am I thankful? Like, what is my connection to that? And I think that there's so many different layers to your methodology, which I love, because, it puts it in a pretty bow. So it's something easy for people to follow that process. But yeah, I appreciate that, because I love that how clear it is. And it is like 4 simple steps that you just described, even in the hardest of times, regardless, personal, professional, emotional, not emotional. I mean, usually it is, but some people, maybe not be living in the emotions. Like, that is a very simple process for you to say, okay, like, where am I feeling this? Why am I doing this? Even like the patterns, not even just triggers, but like patterns in which we continue. Like, why do I keep inviting the same, type of clients into my life? And I know it might sound, after your story, this might sound a bit superficial, but it transcends so much. I love the methodology.
Oh, thank you. And it's not superficial. I mean, I have plenty of limiting beliefs that are aligned to like the dumbest of the dumbest things.
We all do.
I just also happen to have like a doozy. That's all. When we all do. That's the other thing, is I really believe very strongly in, like, there is no such thing in my world as comparative suffering. Like, my biggest thing is just as big as yours. Yes. I can remember back in the day, my brother-in-law, so this same child, when he was about a week old, we brought the priest in to pray for him. Like, he was really, really sick. Obviously, this is 17 years ago now. And I remember my brother-in-law calling and being like, such a jerk. I was so upset this morning that my daughter had conjunctivitis and I had to stay home from work. And I'm like, but that's your biggest thing. Like, you don't get to minimize that just because we're praying for my son to live. Like, you don't have that. So you have this. This is big for you, right? So yeah, I mean, I think like all triggers are created equal. Just some have like a longer shelf life than others.
And it's our own experiences. And I love that you say that, because this is something, and Amanda's heard me talk about this a lot, especially when I was teaching it, like what we used to call our emotionally charged connection, but essentially I go a lot deeper, but essentially it's like a connection to your patterns and the whys that you do. And because I lived such a traumatic life, like, mine are very much embedded in trauma and childhood abuse and a lot of other things. And I remember like sharing this stuff, or like opening up the space for people to share it. And they were like, oh, like, mine's nothing compared to everybody else's. And even as a child, actually, and I wrote about it in the book, which is coming, it'll be out by the time this podcast comes out. But that I remember telling myself as a young girl, like, people have it so much worse than I did. And I didn't realize the programming that I was programming myself at that point. I do as an adult, because this was me as like a 5, 6, 7-year-old. And just this like inner knowing that there's a lot worse in the world, that people are suffering worse, and it was a survival mechanism. However, now I do understand, like, it's not comparative, and we all have to live through our own experiences, and both bad and good, and to like really mind that, because then, especially like for those of us that have had a like extreme traumatic experience, and then people are kind of, so now I'm feeling the other side, or people are like, oh, you suffered so much, or you did this, or you did that. And I'm like, no, that was a choice. Like, that, it's kind of like the whole joy thing, which I want to get back to, joy and happiness, but it's kind of a choice of mindset. And I think that that's like what you're kind of navigating around with the SNAP method too, like really honoring that and owning that. Amanda, I'm so sorry. I'm like, I'm taking all of the questions in the dialogue. I'll stop.
You're allowed to say what you want to say, Lynn. This is your podcast too.
I know.
And these are all great points. I mean, I think the comparative is something that we all do. And it's okay that we do that, as long as we acknowledge that it isn't this giant comparison to everybody else. Everybody else's goals, everybody else's achievements, everybody else's struggles are not your own. And that's okay too.
Well, and I also think as you're going through something, you don't realize a lot of time, or at least I'm working with several clients that are doing this right now, where they think their initial issue is the issue. And once we unpack it, it's like an iceberg, right? So once we take away I don't have enough friends, I need to get more out there. It's like, I have a terrible relationship with my child, right? Like it gets like the bigger stuff is under there, but they just don't realize it until we take some of the top layer bricks off and things can rise to the surface.
So true. The iceberg. I don't mean to laugh. I mean, for those of you watching the video, like both Lynn and I kind of chuckled at that statement because it is so true that it's never that thing that you think it is. And I don't know where I heard this quote recently, but often that thing that you are avoiding is the thing you need to lean into because there's more there than you are wanting to admit to yourself. And it definitely makes a difference when you actually chip away at your mindset and what's really triggering you. It's usually a whole lot bigger than you are admitting to yourself.
I used to have this phrase that I would tell my clients all the time of kind of let it go because people don't understand it. But I would say run towards your turkeys, because turkeys show up in my life in the most bizarre ways. And I like run away from them. And I decided on a run a couple of years, well, now it's like 4 or 5 years ago. Turkeys were literally in the middle of the road. And I was like, I'm having a great run. Like, you are not getting in my way. And I started saying, like, this is a metaphor for my life. I normally just want to run away. So I started running towards the turkeys, which I think turkeys tend to attack people. So that was probably not the best choice. But I was like, I'm going for it. This is my road too. And it was kind of like the Red Sea, right? They kind of like made space for me. And I think I probably thanked God on the other side of it. Like, thank you for not letting them attack me. Right. but it is true. Like, these situations present themselves. They're all learning opportunities. The turkeys were there for some reason. Still not sure why, but they're there to teach you something. So dive into it. When you get that feeling of fear, and I'm not talking about the feeling of fear, like when a bear maybe shows up, that's good. Like, you should be afraid of that. You should not run towards that bear. But other types of fear, I really do believe that's a misunderstood emotion, that it's actually excitement. Like, there is something to learn because there's like such amazing stuff on the other side of that. When I was going through, this was probably about 6 months after everything happened, I was reading this book and this one phrase came up, and it was, trouble is your transportation. And I had that phrase on repeat. I can't tell you, millions of times I have said that to myself, like, hang on, it gets better. This is bringing you to a much better place. And I could not have imagined where it would bring me. I mean, I've met you guys, I've met so many great people as a result of this traumatic event. I left my job in corporate IT marketing leadership. Like, it was 26 years in the wrong career. I had no idea I was in the wrong place. All of that as a result of this. And so there's so much greatness that came out of it. And I can't help but have gratitude for it.
Yeah, it's amazing when we lean into the discomfort or run towards the turkeys, as you say. I love that saying, but like, it is so true, because if you don't, going back to what you were saying about the clients, like, they think it's one thing, but when you dive deeper, like, you can actually get to the root of it. And it's something that I've practiced for years, and I've worked with clients. Don't do it as much anymore, but I definitely do for special clients to like dive into that kind of like root. And the thing, what I found, and I'd love for you to speak on this if you found it as well or not, but what I found is, like, when you continue to just look at the surface, all you're doing is putting in a Band-Aid. So you continue to live that hamster wheel, and you continue to, it might show up slightly different, but it's the same lesson over and over and over again. You're not fully processing through, you're still manifesting the same things over and over. But as you get your clients to dive deeper and deeper and deeper and like see really the root of it, that's where real change happens. That's where long time change happens too. Like you're reclaiming a part of yourself, a part of your energy, a part of your mental, stability, spirit, all of that. And then you're able to build differently off of that. Do you find that as well? Or do you find something different?
100. No, 100%. You're absolutely right. There's so many things that are going through my head. And lucky for you, I'm like ADHD, so I'll lose it in 2 seconds. But one thing is, and this is especially true for women, for some reason, we need permission from someone else to address these things. Like we actually think we're supposed to just have this life that we have, not the future life. So I talk to women a lot about, you don't need permission. You don't need permission from anybody. You just have to know that there's more out there for you. So that's the first thing. The second thing is psychological safety. And I feel like and again, women are more prone to this than men, but we really need to feel psychologically safe in order to open up. So again, that initial client, they think, their biggest thing is, lack of friendships, kind of like these things that might feel, I think you called it like surface level problems, as their biggest problems. And they don't really realize that there's more to it. Well, the more psychological safety we can establish, suddenly they're like, you know what happened? And they throw this landmine at you and you're like, knew it was there. Right. But it has to do with psychological safety. And I can't underscore that point enough. And I think I've struggled with psychological safety with women for years. I have had more bad female managers than men. I've had more bad female relationships than men. Yet I predominantly, I would say for every 100 women I coach, I have 2 men. Isn't that wild? Those women are the ones that I've had the biggest challenges with. Yet I can work with them the best. It's wild to me.
Well, I
know I
think
just
probably
on a tangent, but that just popped up.
you can relate with them differently, obviously, not just the man and the woman, but also you understand the needs because you knew what your needs are now. Maybe you didn't then, but now you see it. And so it's amazing how that kind of comes full circle.
Yeah. And I think it's really healing too, because you're able to see things from a different perspective. It's almost like you're stepping outside of your own situation, looking in. So
if you could leave the audience with one last thought, what would it be?
I would say get really curious about what else is out there for you. We know, in our heart, and which is very different than being in your head. You know in your heart that there's more out there for you, so act on it, and act on it with a sense of urgency. I was literally just at a wedding recently, and there's this woman at the next table has a massive heart attack. Right. Do you think she thought that was going to happen that day? No, of course not. But it's we tend to put things off because we think we have this longevity that isn't guaranteed for us. So if you believe there's more out there for you, do the work to get yourself into a situation where you can enjoy that future life now, instead of next week, next year, when your kids graduate, whatever the scenario may be. And so I just always tell people, please act with a sense of urgency, because, that future life is out there just waiting for you to invite it in. And it takes far less work than you think in order to capture it.
Yeah, tomorrow's never promised.
Right. And I think we know that intrinsically. Do we really believe it?
And do we live it?
And do we live it?
Well, how can people get in contact with you?
Best way is through Instagram. And my Instagram is at the Coleen Greco. My name is spelled uniquely. So take note, COLEENGRECO. Thank you for having me. This is a great discussion.
Too quick. We just got on.
And that's always the way it is when we have interesting people talking, where we look up and like, oh, look, there we are. Time. Sorry about that. But in addition to being able to speak with you, you also are offering something for our audience. Is that right?
Oh, thank you. Yes. So I have an ebook that I'd love to share. It is 4 steps to removing limiting beliefs. It's available on my website, which is ColeenGreco.com/ebooks.
Thank you, Coleen. Yeah, this was a first for me for podcast in emotions. And I am definitely the one who's going to be more vulnerable of the two of us, but this one's just a little bit rawer than usual. So I appreciate you showing up and sharing your story, because I definitely believe, both of us believe in sharing stories, and really empowering each other through the life that we've lived and experienced. So that way others can see from experience or from example.
I love it. And again, thank you for your vulnerability. I just think it was a beautiful moment, and I was glad to experience it.
Yeah, we'll just see if she lets me keep it in the podcast. Or if
I will. Okay, everybody listening to the podcast, I allowed it. I'm stating it here.
All right, well, now it's official.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. We enjoyed having you. And of course, everybody listening, you can find all the information in our show notes. So if you're listening on another platform, if you head back to the pursuitofbadasserie.com/podcast, you'll find everything that you need right there.
Absolutely. So thank you for tuning in and subscribing and listening and sharing and leaving us comments. And until next time,
get after it.
All right, everyone, it's not enough to just listen.
Now you've got to put it into action.
We are so excited to see what you do next.
If you enjoyed our show, please leave us a review on iTunes.
And to find out more about what we're doing, visit us at thepursuitofbadasserie.com.